So I welcome everyone to this class, to this course on Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which is titled as Overview of Gita. We are now covering chapter 9. This is our second class on chapter 9. Last Saturday we had our first class on chapter 9. Before starting the class, I will do small Mangalacharan prayers. You can read with me on the screen and maybe even chant at your respective places. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamarupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guruna Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्रीराधा कृष्ण पादान् सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्रीराधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. This screen is again showing you, like last time we also showed this screen to you, which is the overview chart of chapter 9. And we have already covered the first section and the second section in our previous class. The first section is about the glorification of the knowledge of pure bhakti, which Lord Krishna is revealing in this chapter. And in second section, which is from verse number 4 to 10, Lord Krishna has spoken about the Aishwarya Gyan, the relationship that he has with this world. Today we will be largely covering a portion of the third section, which is describing the different type of worshippers of Lord Krishna. Before I formally begin our lecture today, uh, I'll do a small recap. But before we do the small recap, there was a suggestion from my father who mentioned that you share the sutra word for each chapter after you complete the chapter. Why don't you share the sutra word for each of these chapter uh, just before you start these chapters, and every time you share them so that we have that sutra word instilled in our mind. So I like the suggestion, and this is the sutra word for chapter 9, which is King, King, and K stands for King of Knowledge, like Lord Krishna has been mentioning in these initial verses that this is Raj Vidya. Then I stands for inconceivable energies. So this is representing the second section of the chapter 9, which is Aishwarya Gyan, the Lord's relationship, inconceivable relationship uh, with the material universe, with the material world and the spiritual world. Then the third one is non-worshippers. Non-worshippers actually we'll be discussing today. A portion of that section we will be discussing today, where Lord Krishna will be explaining about various kind of people who take shelter to Lord Krishna, who directly worship Lord Krishna, who indirectly worship Lord Krishna, or who don't actually worship Lord Krishna. So those various varieties of people who uh, come into the fold of Vedic knowledge or Vedic understanding of God. So what are those different mentalities we will be studying today? Then in the end of this chapter, Lord Krishna glorifies pure bhakti. Just to contrast it, he gives this idea of non-worshippers and then continues to glorify the practice of pure bhakti in the end of this chapter. So we will quickly do the recap of the chapter 9, what we did in the last class. So we briefly had some introduction about chapter 9, which mentions about the confidentiality aspect of chapter 9. So we discussed about what is confidential, what is more confidential, and what is the most confidential. So we consider the knowledge of matter and spirit as confidential. Then which is discussed between chapter 2 and chapter 6 in Bhagavad Gita. Then in chapter 7 and 8, we call this knowledge as more confidential, Guhyatara, and that is the knowledge of bhakti. So Lord Krishna starts to speak about bhakti from chapter 7 onwards, and in 8 also he develops the concept. But the most confidential knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna mentions in chapter 9 and chapter 10. And this is what he calls is as knowledge of pure bhakti. We also call it as Shuddha Bhakti or Kevala Bhakti. Then we also give a little thought that Gita actually represents the essence of all Vedic scriptures. And within the Gita, the essence of Gita is contained in middle 6 chapters. And even middle 6 chapters, the essence of middle 6 chapters is covered in chapter number 9 and 10. So at the moment we are covering those, the essence of the essence of the essence of Vedic knowledge, you can say. That is chapter 9 and 10. So these are really, you can say, very important chapters, or on which a lot of importance has been laid down by the acharyas in Vaishnava Parampara. We also try to understand that chapter 9 and chapter 7 has a lot of similarities, and that is what we covered in this slide. The flow of thought in chapter 7 and flow of thought in chapter 9 is more or less the same, and the kind of topics that have been brought up by Lord Krishna in chapter 9 is also very similar to chapter 7. However, in chapter 9, he has developed those concepts he introduced in chapter 7 into more detail. So you will find there are a lot of more details coming up in chapter 9 on those topics. Then we entered into the chapter itself. We started discussing various verses. So the first verse, Lord Krishna emphasizes that this is the most confidential knowledge. He says, Guhya Tamam. And then why he's speaking that most confidential knowledge to Arjuna is because Arjuna is non-envious of the Lord. So here the clue for us is that in order to gain this knowledge of pure bhakti, we should be having a non-envious heart, or the more non-envious heart we have, the better we can understand this knowledge. So it is not a very 0 or 1 kind of a thing, but the more non-envious heart we have, the more we can appreciate and realize this knowledge of pure bhakti. In the verse number 9.2, Lord Krishna mentions 8 characteristics of pure bhakti, which starts from king of all philosophies. This is king of all secrets. It purifies the devotee or the sadhaka from all material contamination. It is transcendental to the activities of the world. It is beyond the modes. It gives the direct experience of the self. So once you start practicing bhakti, then you directly starts to feel the improvement and feel the purification aspect of bhakti. It is mentioned as it is a perfection of religion. It can be performed very easily and joyfully. Simply you can offer a flower to the Lord, you can offer water to the Lord, and that's how simple it can be. Also, it is everlasting, eternal, and indestructible. So it is not that we perform bhakti in this lifetime and then we gain mukti or moksha and then it's done, and then we don't have to do anything. So it's not that. So Vaishnava understanding is that we do bhakti, which is service of the Lord in this lifetime, but we also continue that service of the Lord when we go back to him in his spiritual abode. So that is why it is mentioned as bhakti is abhyayam, everlasting, eternal, and indestructible. In the third verse, we understood that another qualification of bhakti is to have faith. A small shraddha is needed to have the bhakti process to begin. And this Shraddha can be acquired by the association of devotees. So a person who has this Shraddha in his heart, through the association, through the mixing of these two people, two personalities, a devotee and maybe a Shraddhavan, the Shraddha can actually further grow. So that is what Lord Krishna is saying here, that faithless cannot attain Krishna. For devotion, for pure bhakti, or for bhakti at least, we need faith. That comes from association of devotees. Then we came to the second section of this chapter where Lord Krishna is explaining about the Aishwarya Gyan, the opulent, uh, the greatness of the Lord, where he is explaining the relationship of his with the world, with the material world, with the spiritual world. That's what he's trying to explain in verse number 4 till verse number 10. So in verse number 4, Lord Krishna says that he's in everything. So first of all, he starts describing about how he maintains the world. He says that he's in everything. Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina. In a avyakta murtina means in an invisible form, he's everywhere. But again, in the very next verse, he contradicts himself. He says that yet he's not in everything. So this is something like a contradictory statement made by the Lord, where he's saying he's in first time he's saying in everything, and then he's saying he's not in everything. So for maintenance purposes, we have to understand, and I try to explain this with an analogy. I mentioned that like a king who is situated in the palace, so he's present in the palace, he's not present everywhere else. So you can say that, but he is present uh, among the various government offices or the offices in his kingdom through his powers, through his energies. So that is how we can understand that he is in everything, but he is not in everything. So he lives in his personal abode, Golok Vrindavan, but through his energies, he maintains the universe through and throughout. So that is how we can understand how he's in everything, but yet he's not in everything. And we gave this example where we showed you in 9.6, Lord Krishna himself gives this very nice example. He says that like a wind blows everywhere, but still it rests in the sky. Similarly, all created beings rest in me. And we try to explain this by a picture here, and maybe you have also heard this Leela or this pastime of the Lord, where Lord Krishna opens up his mouth and shows the whole universe to Mother Yashoda. Even Mother Yashoda is herself able to see within the mouth of Krishna, sitting and feeding Krishna. So Krishna is saying that the whole world is within me, but I'm outside of the world as well. So Mother Yashoda is within Krishna also, but she is outside Krishna also. So that is how Lord Krishna is trying to explain how this is inconceivable. Then from verse number 7 to 8, Lord Krishna speaks about creation and destruction of the material world using his energies. So here in the picture, you can see the incarnation or the expansion of the Lord is as Mahavishnu, where he creates the world, and at the end of Brahma's day, or at the end of Brahma's life, he also destroys the world. The destruction again takes place. And this happens in a cyclic manner. Again and again, it creates, it destroys. And then in 9.8, Lord Krishna is saying that whole cosmic order is manifested and destroyed again and again according to my order, as per my will. In 9.9, Lord Krishna is clarifying that although I do this destruction, I do this creation, I do this maintenance, so some people might think that I'm doing some activity, and that because I'm creating something, I'm destroying something, I might get some karmic reaction. So here Lord Krishna is explaining, no, he doesn't get any karmic reaction. And why? He gives the reason, because he's neutral and he's detached. That is why he doesn't get any karmic reaction. In 9.10, Krishna mentions that he is the chief supreme director of the Prakriti, of the material nature. He says, Maya dhakshena Prakriti, suyate sa characharam, hetu nanena kaunteya, jagat viparivartate. So the bottom line of section 2 of chapter 9 is that the Lord is everywhere. Lord controls everywhere. Nothing in this world is untouched with the material, with the energies of the Lord. So he's in full control. He's fully the in charge, yet the living entities who are living in this material world have limited independence, and which they exercise from time to time. And that's how the Lord will now explain what is the best way to exercise this independence from time to time, by explaining the process of pure devotional service in this chapter. Now we will move to the section, the third section of this class, which is where we are we will discuss about different type of worshippers of Lord Krishna. And let me also give you a little bit of a maybe a little heads up, that to some of you this particular section will appear a little technical. It might appear a little complex also. However, I will try to explain this with as much simplification, as much ease as far as my capacity is concerned. But in the end, if there are some doubts, we can discuss them. Also, I will be sending you the bullet point summary of this chapter. If those summary points are understandable to you, I think that is a good enough progress at the time being. However, for people who are more interested in going into the details, we can discuss the details also separately. Now, giving you a little idea of what this section is about, as we have mentioned, and like it happened in chapter 7 also, in chapter 9, in this section, the third section, Lord Krishna is speaking about different type of worshippers of Lord Krishna. These worshippers may be worshipping Lord Krishna in an indirect way. These worshippers may be worshipping Lord Krishna in an incorrect way, with a misconception. And these worshippers might be worshipping Krishna correctly, as he would like people, or as he would like devotees to worship him. So these are the various categories you will see in this section Lord Krishna has described. One of the most challenging category Lord Krishna describes is explained in verse number 11 and 12. And that is where I would like to spend a little time in this class. Although I aspire to cover till verse number 19 today, but if in my explanation I may take a little long time to explain these particular first two verses, so kindly bear with me. First of all, I will try to draw your attention before I recite this verse. I will try to I will like to that you draw I will like to draw your attention to the picture that is mentioned on this screen. Now on this screen there are two pictures equally placed, one before the other, one one at the side of the other. And the picture on the left, you will see on the top there is a bright light shown, and in the bottom there are some images shown of various deities like Lord Krishna, Lord Shiva, Saraswati, Durga, Lakshmi, Ganesh, Brahma, and so on. So it is showing a light above and some deity forms at the bottom. Similarly, on the right hand side, you will see Lord Krishna playing a flute. It is shown on the top. Then at the bottom, it is shown a bright light. And then at the bottommost portion, it is shown various deity forms like Saraswati, Durga, Lord Ganesh, Brahma, and Lord Shiva. So there's a little contrast, and there's a little difference between the two pictures. In the picture which is on the left, a very bright light is shown on the top. And in the picture on the right, Lord Krishna is shown on the top. Now here, I would like to explain the concept of absolute truth. You might have heard maybe in your spiritual readings, while reading a spiritual book, this term is often discussed, is often used, which is known as absolute truth. In Hindi, we also call it as Param Satya. Now, what is this concept of absolute truth or Param Satya? So to explain you in a very simple way, absolute truth means from where everything comes, cause of all causes, or in Sanskrit we can call it Sarva Karana Karanam. Now people who study Vedas, who study Vedanta, there are two school of thoughts. The people who study Vedanta, or Vedic literature, one school of thought believes that the absolute truth is an impersonal light. It's a bright light, it's an impersonal in nature, it pervades everywhere, which is the picture on the left that you see. And the other school of thought is of the opinion or thinks that the absolute truth is Lord Shri Krishna. And then the bright light is something which is part of Lord Krishna. It is not the absolute truth. So when we say Krishna is absolute truth, that means from Lord Krishna comes everything. Sarva Karana Karanam. So these are the two school of thoughts. Now, what we are studying here in Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta, in Vaishnava Siddhanta, this thought that Lord Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, that thought is acknowledged by all the Vaishnava Siddhanta, all the Vaishnava schools, and it has been backed by personalities like Madhvacharya, Shripad Ramanujacharya, Vallabhacharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and so on and so forth. So now, after giving that little background behind this verse, I will now chant this verse for you, and then try to explain you what this verse actually imply. So the verse goes like this: Avajananti mam mudha manushim tanumashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. So the message from this verse is that the impersonalists consider Krishna as an ordinary human, and to such believers of the spiritual science, Lord Krishna is calling them mudha. Mudha means ignorance, ignorant, or you can call it foolish. You can also call it foolish. Now here there are two words which I have. One is I have highlighted in red, and the another one I have highlighted in green. The word that I've highlighted in red is avajananti, and the word that I have highlighted in green is ajananto. So there is a difference between the two words. Avajananti means misunderstood, misconception. Ajananti means do not know, ignorance. Now, ajananti means ignorance. So you can say that people who do not know Krishna are certainly, this is not encouraging. At least people should know Krishna. So, uh, uh, and avajananti means people who misunderstand Krishna or have a misconception about Krishna. So, one way to differentiate between the two words is one explanation could be that people may call ajananti as inferior to avajananti. So they don't know Krishna at all. So maybe they are maybe inferior to people who are avajananti. But if you look at the same concept in a different way, avajananti could be even more difficult one, or it could be even worse than ajananti. How? Because people who understand something, or if they develop a misconception about something, then in order to bring those people to the right conception, what we have to do? First of all, we have to erase the misconception from their mental slate. After erasing the misconception from their mental slate, we have to give them the right conception on their slate. So the effort is much more. But when somebody is ignorant, simply if you tell them the right thing, he picks up the right thing right from the very beginning. Now, these are the class of people which we are discussing right now. These are called impersonalists. And uh, that's what Lord Krishna is saying is that, and these impersonalists, because of their misconception, they misunderstand Krishna, they misunderstand the Supreme Lord, and that is why the kind of mentality or the kind of understanding they develop can lead to difficulties for them themselves. So after now the problem, now I will go little into the detail. So we understood about what is misconception, what is ignorance, and we understood that how misconception can be even more difficult than ignorance. Now coming to specifically what is the misconception. Now the misconception is that people who are impersonalists, they think that absolute truth cannot be understood. And since the absolute cannot be understood, then the absolute truth takes shelter of a form, and this form could be of a Krishna, it could be a form of a Ram, it could be a form of Lord Shiva, it could be a form of Saraswati, it could be a form of Lord Ganesh, it could be any form. And the absolute truth, the impersonal absolute truth, take this form through the contact of material modes. Material modes means, like we studied in chapter 7, that there is a Prithvi, Agni, Jal, Vayu, Akash, Man, Buddhi, Ahankar. So like we take, like the human beings take a form, they are a spirit, soul, and then they take a material body. Similarly, the conception with these impersonalists is that the absolute truth is spiritual, but this spiritual takes shelter of a form which is material. And why do they think? They think that this happens because people will have difficulty understanding the nature of the absolute truth. So in order to facilitate this process, the absolute truth take this form. And why do they think so? Because they, from their experience, they try to understand that form means limitation. And uh, only material form can have and only material or only a matter can have a form, and matter is limited. So that is why they consider that the absolute truth, when they take a form, it is very limited and it is material in nature. And they derive to this conclusion because of their experience of this material nature. So this is what Lord Krishna is criticizing in this verse, where he's saying, avajananti mamudha manushim tanum ashritam. Now here he's saying is, manushim means human, tanum means body, and ashritam means take shelter of. So here Lord Krishna is saying that these people, these mudhas or these foolish people, they misunderstand me, and they consider that I take a human form, or I take shelter of a human form. And why this ignorance is? Because they don't understand my param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Because they don't understand my higher spiritual nature, and that is why they misunderstand me, that I have taken shelter of a human form. And this is the misunderstanding that they develop, and because of this misunderstanding, I'm calling them as mudha. So this is the understanding of this particular slide. And if you see the picture here, you see the very bright light on the top in the picture of the left. And this is the conception these impersonalist people have, that the impersonal bright light now has taken a form which is material in nature. So that is the key point, material in nature. We will further build up upon this concept. So as I was mentioning in the previous slide, the ignorance is that they don't understand my param bhava. Param bhava means my higher spiritual nature. So this difficulty, that this confusion comes in these impersonalists, because when Lord comes and takes a form, they understand that the form has to be material. And because the form has to be material, that will be limited. And because it is limited, that limited means they are just like human beings. So that is how they minimize, or they reduce the position of the Supreme Lord to ordinary living entities like human beings. However, they are ignorant, as the Lord is saying, param bhavam ajananto. And why they are ignorant? They are ignorant that absolute truth can have a form and still be unlimited. That is the param bhav of this absolute truth, that it can have a form, but at the same time it can be unlimited. Why and how to explain that? Because the absolute truth's form, which is absolute truth when we are saying is Lord Krishna, because absolute truth form is not material in nature, it is actually spiritual in nature. So because it is spiritual in nature, it can be unlimited. And since it can be unlimited, that is the param bhav of the absolute truth. Now here the word The difficulty with these kind of mindset is explained in the second bullet here, where Lord Krishna has used in the previous verse. Lord Krishna has used this word avajananti ma mudha manushim tanum ashritam. Ashritam means taking shelter. So when we say taking shelter, we generally take shelter, or we take shelter of something which is different from us, which is different from us. For example, when it is raining, a man take a shelter of a tree. So tree is different from a man. Similarly, if somebody is very poor and he needs some wealth, the person might take shelter of a rich. So a poor is different from a rich, and a rich is different from a poor. Man is different from a tree, and like that. So when the concept of shelter comes, we are talking about that we are taking a shelter of something which is different from us. So which implies that Krishna form, so the impersonalists are thinking that when Krishna takes a form, the form actually is different from what the nature of absolute truth is. So they think that the absolute truth is actually impersonal Brahman, it is spiritual in nature, but when it takes a form, it changes into a human being. So that is something which is reducing the absolute truth from spiritual to material. And that is what Lord Krishna is criticizing here. Now, how to understand this topic, and how to settle the debate between impersonalists versus personalists? So there are multiple references in the scriptures, starting from Brahma Samhita. Even Srimad Bhagavad Gita also gives a lot of references. But I have chosen some of those references which are really very strong, and which probably we can have a little more faith than the other references. So first of all, the reference comes where in Brahma Samhita, Lord Brahma himself mentions Ishwaraha Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. Now here are one word is Vigraha. Vigraha means form. So I have highlighted that word in red font. You can see here. So Ishwaraha Parama Krishna. So it's very clear. Ishwara, who is the supreme controller? Who is the Parama means supreme. Who is the supreme controller? Supreme controller is Krishna, whose form, who has a form, and how is that form? He's not saying that that form is made up of panchabhutas. No, it is not saying. He's saying the form is Sat Chid Anand. It is spiritual in nature. So Sat Chid Anand Vigraha. Then there's an Upanishad which is Gopala Tapani Upanishad, and this in this Upanishad, the very first verse in this Upanishad says Satchidananda Rupaya Krishnaya. So who is Krishna? Who has a Rupaya, and the Roop means form, whose Roop is Sat Chid Anand. So that is the second reference. Then the third reference is, so in the first two reference, I have tried to establish that the Lord has a form. Krishna has a form. In the third reference, I have tried to establish that the form is like a human. What is the third reference? Yatra Vatirnam Krishnakhyam Parama Brahma Narakriti. So the last word that you see is Narakriti. How is the form? That form is like a Nara, like a human. And this reference comes from Vishnu Purana. Then in the fourth one, so like the impersonalists mention that it is Brahman, and then the Brahman takes a form of a human. It takes shelter of a form of a human. Now it implies that the form can continuously changing. No, that is what is refuted in item 4, where it says Shat Pundrika Nayanam Megha Abham Vedutyambaram Dvibhujam Mauna Mudradhayam Vanamalinam Ishwaram. Now the word here is Sat. Sat means eternal. Sat Pundrika Nayanam. So the Lord has a form which has lotus eyes. Pundrik means lotus. Nayanam means eyes. Then the third word is Megha Abham. Now his Abha, his color is like what? His color is like Megha. Megha means rain cloud. So like we always call Lord Krishna Shama. Shama means dark complexion. So here the reference comes how the form is. So he's saying Megha Abham. And then Vedutya Ambaram. Ambaram means the clothes. So the clothes are resplendent, they are bright. Vedyut. Vedyut means bright. Then Dvibhujam. Dvibhujam means he has two arms. And then Mauna Mudra Dhyam, and he's keeping silent. He's standing silent in a mudra form. Then Vanamalinam, he has a garland, and then he's the Ishwaram. So here it is established that the Lord form is eternal. The Lord form doesn't change. It is not that just to make people easy to understand, the Lord takes a form which is material, which is like a human, and that's what it is not clear. That is what not Lord want to mention here. Then uh, what is the connection between Lord Krishna and Brahman? So in the previous slide, or in the very first slide that I displayed, I try to explain you that the Brahman is the, in one picture I have shown Brahman at the top, and in the second picture I have shown Krishna at the top. Now here comes the reference in Bhagavad Gita where Lord Krishna says, Brahmano hi pratisthaham. Now what does it mean? Here the Lord Krishna is saying, I am the basis of Brahman. So I am the basis of Brahman means that the Brahman comes from me, not the other way around. Not that I am coming from Brahman, not like that. So in these 4 or 5 references, I have tried to prove, or I have tried to kind of establish that Lord Krishna is a vigraha, it is a form. Then it is a form is like a human, Narakriti. Then this form is eternal, where it says it is Sat Pundarika Nayanam, and so on. And then in the fourth stage, what I have tried to establish is that Brahman comes from Krishna and not the other way around. So that is the verse where Lord Krishna is trying to criticize, or he's trying to chastise people, or those spiritualists who consider that Lord Krishna is a ultimate reality, or the absolute truth is pervasiveness, is bright effulgent light, a Brahman, and that Brahman now takes shelter of a form which is a material form. So that is what Lord Krishna in this verse is actually criticizing. So in case you have any difficulty in understanding this concept, we can discuss it privately also, but that is how I would like to explain this 11th verse of the 9th chapter. Now in the next verse, in the 12th verse of the 9th chapter, Lord Krishna is explaining what is the fate of such impersonalist believers. So here he is mentioning मोघ आशा मोघ कर्माणो मोघ ज्ञाना विचेतसाः राक्षसीम आसुरीम चैव प्रकृतिम मोहिनीम श्रिता प्रकृतिम मोहिनीम आश्रिताः. So the translation of this verse goes like this, where the Gita mentions like, those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demoniac and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So what Lord Krishna in nutshell is trying to emphasize in this verse is that if you understand me in a wrong way, then whatever endeavors you are trying to do to achieve spiritual enlightenment or to achieve spiritual progress, that will be simply a waste. That will simply be a failure. And that's what the word mogha in this verse means. Mogha asha, mogha karmano, mogha jnana vichetasa. So whatever karma you do, whatever uh, karma kandi rituals you might do, whatever jnana yagya or jnana, or trying to understand the knowledge you might have, all those aspirations, activities of yours will simply be lead to a failure, a wastage in your endeavor. So Moga Asha, Moga Karmano, Moga Jnana Vichetasa, Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva, Prakritim Mohinim Shrita. Now let us try to give a little thought how that dynamic works. Because how this Rakshasim, Asurim, Chaiva, Prakritim, Mohinim Shrita, how this particular dynamics work. So what these impersonalists may potentially lead towards is when they consider that the absolute truth is a spirit. It is pure spirit, Satchid Anand. And that particular spirit actually takes a form which is like a human. Then how do they extrapolate this understanding, and where they do go wrong is that they try to understand that I am also spirit, I am also a spirit soul, I am also spiritual in nature. I also have taken a form. I also have taken this material form. And when this body will be no longer there, when I will die, and I have done the spiritual perfection, I will also become spiritual, like the absolute truth. And then they go further, and then that's what the mistake they actually make is they think that we will also become Brahman. We will also become the absolute truth. In other words, they try to say that I will also become God. So that is the defect in the impersonalist philosophy, which sometimes lead towards the thinking that I can also become God. मैं भी खुदा बन जाऊंगा, या मैं भी खुदा हूं, इस तरह से वो विचार करते हैं या विचार करने लगते हैं. And that is where the problem lies. And this is where the Lord is criticizing heavily, and he's mentioning that such people are actually mudhas. They are foolish, and whatever activities they might do with this kind of a thinking, that will lead to a wastage, that will lead to a failure. And why this is a failure? Because God is supreme and the jiva is subordinate to God. So भगवान परम है, भगवान स्वामी है, जीव जो है वो सेवक है. यह भावना, यह प्रिंसिपल, यह सिद्धांत जो पर्सनलिस्ट हैं, जो साकारवादी हैं, या जो ये समझते हैं कि भगवान श्री कृष्ण परम भगवान हैं या परम सत्य हैं और उनका उनसे ही ब्रह्म जो है वो उद्भूत होता है, ऐसे भक्त ये मानते हैं कि भगवान सुप्रीम है, भगवान स्वामी हैं और हम भक्त हैं, हम सेवक हैं. इस प्रकार का जब संबंध, जब तक ये रिलेशनशिप का क्राइटेरिया, अनलेस एंड अनटिल दिस रिलेशनशिप क्राइटेरिया बिटवीन द लॉर्ड एंड द जीवात्मा is clear in the mind of the devotee, is clear in the mind of the practitioner, the progress in devotional life, progress in pure bhakti will not happen, will not take place. And that is what Lord Krishna is actually mentioning in 9.12. So from there, we will go to verse number 13, which is a relatively very easy verse. From now on, I think it is relatively easy. But understanding verse number 11 and verse number 12, you have to apply a little bit of your intelligence, maybe some time, to go through the various literature, Vedic literature, uh, to go and to manan and to do some contemplation on this particular aspect, how these are building, what are the logics Vaishnava acharyas are using, and so on. And that probably will lead to some appreciation of these two words. But I tried my level best to explain this concept as concisely and as best possible as per my ability. But now coming to the verse number 13, here in verse number 13 and verse number 14, what Lord Krishna is trying to explain is he's trying to explain the pure devotee. So previously he has explained people whom he's criticizing, who is saying that their efforts will be a waste, and we should not develop those kind of mindset. Now he's actually appreciating those people who are in a opposite mindset, who are taking shelter of the Lord. And then here he's saying, Lord Krishna is saying, महात्मानस्तु मां पार्थ दैवीं प्रकृतिमाश्रिताः भजन्ते अनन्य मनसो ज्ञात्वा भूतादिमव्ययम्. So the word used here is Mahatma, and Lord is saying that such Mahatma takes shelter of my Devim Prakritim. In the previous verses, where in verse number 12, which is this verse, if you see here, Lord Krishna is saying is Prakritim Mohinim Ashrita. Mohinim means deluded. Mohinim means Brahmit. So they take ashraya of Mohinim Prakriti, which is the Maya potency of the Lord. So because of that, they take to Rakshasi or Asurim kind of a mentality. But here in the verse number 13, Lord Krishna is explaining that such people who take the shelter of my Devi Prakriti. Devi Prakriti means spiritual Prakriti. These people are Mahatmas. These are great souls. Maha means great, and Atma means souls. So Mahatmas. So these are great souls. And then what do they do after taking the shelter of my Devim Prakriti? Bhajanty ananya manaso yatva bhutadim avyayam. Bhajanty ananya manaso. Bhajanty means worship me. They engage in my devotional service. They engage in my bhakti. And then how do they engage? They engage with ananya manaso. Ananya manaso. Mana means mind. Ananya means without any deviation. Koi anya nahi. Only well focused, with all focused on the Lord. I have to achieve you. I have to take shelter of your lotus feet. I have to serve you, O my dear Lord. With that kind of mindset, they serve me, they worship me, they fully engage in my devotional service without any distractions. So kind of Lord Krishna is now giving a little bit of a contrast between two extremes. In the first 11 and 12th verses, he has explained, criticized those people where they are trying to reduce or minimize the form of the Lord, although they might be spiritual. But since they reduce or minimize the form of the Lord, they the Lord criticizes them. They call him mudha, foolish. But here in this particular case, in verse number 13, Lord Krishna is mentioning that uh, the people who take my shelter of my Devi Prakriti, they are actually Mahatmas. They are actually my pure devotees because they engage in my worship without any distraction. Now, in this 14th verse, Lord Krishna is explaining or giving the symptoms of the Mahatma. So, what are the symptoms of these Mahatma? What these Mahatmas actually do? What are the activities? How can you identify such Mahatmas through these activities? So, here Lord Krishna is saying, Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dradhavrataha namasyantascha mam bhaktya nityayukta upasate. So the translation of this verse goes like this. Here, the symptoms of Mahatmas are being defined here. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me. These great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. So here you can see it's a very important verse, and it is the verse where the for the first time the word kirtan appears in Bhagavad Gita. Kirtan, because in ISKCON, if you are connected with ISKCON or with Hare Krishna movement, or at least you might have seen some Hare Krishna devotees on the road or on streets, you will see that they are always chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. They are not only chanting, they are actually singing with joy. They are glorifying the Lord. They are dancing also on the streets. So here the word kirtan actually comes in Bhagavad Gita, and not only kirtan comes, actually the word kirtan is preceded by a very strong describer or a qualifier. That word is satatam. Satatam means always. So always chant my glories, always singing my glories. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dradvrata. And how are they endeavoring? How are they engaged in all these activities? They are engaged with dradvrata. They are engaged with lot of determination. And then he's saying namasyantascha mam bhaktya. So who's my bhaktya? Who's my pure devotee? Who worships me? Who bow downs before me? And then nitya yukta upasate. He worships me perpetually. He worships me always. He continuously, always, he's eager to offer worship to me. And that is what Lord Krishna is glorifying his pure devotee here. He's saying that it's satatam kirtayanto, with dradhavrata, with bowing down before me and perpetually worship me. So here a little clarification on this point where satatam kirtayanto means. So satatam kirtayanto doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start singing with kartals in your hand, or maybe with a mridanga or a dholak in your hands, uh, and continuously do it non-stop 24 hours or maybe 12 hours and so on. So it doesn't necessarily mean. Kirtan can also means reading about Krishna. Kirtan can also means speaking about Krishna. Kirtan can also means discussing about Krishna. Kirtan can also means doing arrangements for organizing a program for Krishna. So all those activities which enhances our remembrance of the Lord, which engages our mind, our activity, our hands, our legs, our brain, our eyes, our ears, in performing any service towards the Lord, can fall in the category of Kirtan. And that's what the Lord is saying. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dhradavrata namasyantascha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. So a very important verse in Bhagavad Gita where Lord is glorifying devotional service in this particular verse. Okay, so having covered the two extremes, in 11th and 12th verse, Lord Krishna has explained something which we should be cautious about, which is he's criticizing. In verse number 13 and 14, Lord Krishna is showing us the other extreme where he's saying that these are the pure devotees, and that is what I really like. Now, in verse number 15, Lord Krishna explains those people who are in between. Now, there could be multiple people who could be in between, multiple varieties of spiritualists or transcendentalists who could be in between these two extremes. So, that is what Lord Krishna is explaining in verse number 15. So, we will discuss this now. So, Lord Krishna is now saying here is Jnana yagyena chapyante yajanto mamupasate ekatvena prathaktvena bahuda vishvato mukham. The translation goes like this: others who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge, or in short, you can say others who engage in Gyan Yagya, worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, as diverse in many, and in the universal form. So he has used three categories of people, and that is what I have highlighted in red, green, and blue. So he's saying, what are these three categories of people? These three categories of people are Ekatvena, Prathaktwena, and Vishwato Mukham. Now, what does Ekatvena, Prathaktwena, Vishwato Mukham means? Ekatvena, these are those categories of people who think that we are spiritual, Lord is also spiritual, so we are one with the Lord. Our nature, our ultimate nature is actually same as that of the Lord. So they actually worship me, or what Lord Krishna is saying, that they worship Krishna in oneness, thinking themselves as spiritual like God. Now, this might sound very similar to the thinking of people who we have discussed in verse number 11 and 12, which says that the Lord is spiritual, the absolute truth is spiritual, but now has taken a form. So there is a difference between these two categories of people. The difference is that those people which we discussed in 11th and 12th, they minimize the form of the spiritual reality of the absolute truth to a material form, which is a human like form, and it says that it takes shelter of that form, which is different from it. So they kind of minimize the position of the absolute truth or the Supreme Lord. However, these people, they don't do that. They don't have that kind of a mindset that they minimize the form. They simply think that we are also spiritual, the Lord is also spiritual. I am also Satchid Anand, the soul is also Satchid Anand, and the Param, the super soul or the Paramatma is also Satchid Anand. The Atma is Satchidanand and the Paramatma is also Satchidanand. So since both are spiritual in nature, that is how they understand the Supreme Lord, where they actually worship the impersonal Brahma Jyoti of the Lord. That's what they focus upon, that this is spiritual, I am also spiritual, and that is what they are calling as, the Lord is calling as Ekatvena. So Lord has described about these people in more detail in chapter 12 from verse number 1 to verse number 5. The second category of people the Lord describes is Prathaktwena. Prathaktwena means these kind of people, they consider, or their mindset is that there are many forms of the Lord. And for example, they would think that Lord Saraswati is also maybe one representation of the same absolute truth. Similarly, they might consider Goddess Durga also the same represent of the impersonal absolute truth. Similarly, they can extend this to many of the demigods. It can be extended to Lord Ganesh, Lord Shiva, and so on. So this is what we are calling here is, or the Lord is calling here is Prathaktwena. They worship Krishna in diversity. They have variety. in many forms as the demigods, as Devi Devatas. So they identify a Devi Devata and assume that it is actually the representation of the Supreme Lord, and that's how they worship them. So these kind of people have been elaborated by the Supreme Lord in this particular chapter, and that will be covered from verse number 20 to 25, maybe in the next class. Then the third category is Vishwato Mukham. Vishwato Mukham means these people, they don't have advanced understanding of the Supreme Lord. They don't understand the Supreme Lord uh, as maybe taking in a form of a demigod, or maybe they are it's a spiritual being like we are, like the Ekatvenas think. But they think that there is some energy out there, there is some greatness out there, and there is some energy out there which is controlling everything, and that is potentially getting manifested in this universe that we see all around. So when they see a big mountain, when they see sun, when they see moon, when they see material nature, when they see these kind of attributes, the great attributes, they consider that this is something coming from some great authority or some great uh, power that is coming from there. And in that understanding, they start to worship material nature. They starts to worship Surya, starts to worship Chandra. They do that kind of a worship with that kind of understanding. And this is what is known as Vishwato Mukham. So they understand Vishwa as the Mukha, as the Rupa of the Lord, and with that understanding they discuss this. So this particular aspect we will discuss in this particular class, which is covered in chapter number 16 and 19. However, I would like to throw a little bit more detail on these three categories of people, which are somewhere in between the two extremes. Maybe atheistic people or impersonalists who deride the Supreme Lord as taken a human form. And the other stream is the pure devotee of the Lord who surrenders to the Lord with full heart and soul. So in between these two categories, these two are there. Now I'm trying to explain this three categories of people in a little more simpler English, and try to bring a little background and context to all these three categories of people. Now, what is the background? So when we are living in this material world, we are born in this world, we live in this world, go to school, have education, and develop some kind of a curiosity with the environment around us. So for some people, when they develop this curiosity around the environment around them, they sometimes might think that from where this all environment is coming. And some kind of thoughts like this starts to lead them towards the conception of God. So they don't, so most of the people or many people, they don't start to think about God suddenly. It is not that they starts to think that the Lord Krishna is the absolute truth, and that is the absolute form of the Lord to which we have to surrender. But that understanding and the concept development towards God takes place in various stages, and that is what these various stages are implying here. So I'm taking the first of all the Vishwato Mukham part. So this is, in English we can call them as pantheists or pantheism. Pantheism means everything around me is actually God. Everything is God. This sun is also God. This moon is also a representation of God. This earth, the Prithvi is also God. So what these kind of people think is that there is a lot of vastness around me. There is a lot of greatness around me. There is a big universe around me, and that is coming from some great personality or some great authority or some great power. They don't understand, they don't have a very clear cut idea about what that great power is, what that great authority is, but they kind of starts to consider that something higher is there, and from there they starts to connect all these things with God. And these people are known as pantheists, or what is being mentioned here is as Vishwato Mukham. They think that vastness and pervasiveness of universe is equal to greatness of God. That is what these kind of people do. Then the second category of people is polytheists. Polytheists means Now the first category was everything is God. The second category thinks that there are many gods. Huh? And these are the demigod worshippers. They think that the absolute truth or the supreme power is now available or accessible in multiple forms, and that is what they call as prithaktvena, polytheism. So these kind of people think that that ultimate reality is there. So they are advancing from pantheism stage to the next stage, which is polytheism. They are thinking that the ultimate power is there, but that ultimate power is actually coming here in the form of various gods, and these are various demigods or various forms that are there, and that's how they develop that kind of a attitude towards spirituality. And the third part is ekatvena. Ekatvena, these people, when they have crossed this pantheism stage or the polytheism stage, they starts to develop this understanding that I am eternal, and and since I am eternal, the supreme being should also be eternal, and that is how they starts to connect themselves that I am also eternal, the supreme ultimate reality is also eternal, I am also spiritual, the ultimate reality is also spiritual. So I am also the same quality, and the ultimate reality is also the same quality. Now these people are also known as Brahmavadis. So these people don't minimize the form of the absolute truth into something which is material, like what people in the 11th and 12th verse have been doing. But these are more Brahmavadis. They worship the Lord as same quality as they are. So that's how these people worship. So you can now appreciate that in chapter number 7, where we understood about artha, about artharthi, about jigyasu, about jnani. Now we have three more categories to understand. These are ekatvena, these are prithaktvena, these are vishwato mukham. So in order of a spiritual understanding, you can call that vishwato mukham are the more basic ones. Then prithaktvena are somewhere in the middle, and the ekatvena are a little bit more advanced, because the ekatvena do understand the spiritual aspect or adhyatmic aspect of the supreme Lord. So that is how we can categorize these three categories. So now in verse number 16 to verse number 19, what we will be discussing is about the Vishwato Mukham category, the pantheisms or the pantheists, the people who understand that God is everywhere. I mean, the moon is also God, the sun is also God. Like those category of people, they how do they worship and approach Krishna? So here Lord Krishna is saying, अहम क्रतुरहम यज्ञ स्वधाहम औषधम मंत्रोहम अहमेवा मंत्रोहम अहम एवाज्यम अहम अग्निर अहम हुतम. So here Lord Krishna is explaining that when these kind of devotees who sees Lord everywhere, they actually sees me in the sacrifices also. So these kind of people, the way they worship the universal form of the Lord is by doing the yajna, the havan, and that is what the Lord is mentioning here. It is saying that, but it is I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, I the offering to the ancestors, I am the healing herb, I am the transcendental chant, I am the ghee that is being offered in the fire, I am actually the fire, and I am the offering. So they see everything, the offering, the ghee, the fire, the yajna, the sacrifice, the process, everything as me. So that is what Lord Krishna is trying to explain, how the Vishwato Mukham or the pantheists actually sees me. So they see that Krishna actually is the various elements of all sacrifice, or you can say the supreme power or the supreme Lord is actually the various elements of these all sacrifices. So in verse number 17 till 19th, Lord Krishna has explained multiple categories of examples where which implies that the Lord is all pervading, ultimate shelter, cause of all causes. Now I have I have picked up only 3 examples. However, Lord Krishna actually takes multiple examples. So the examples Lord Krishna is explaining in these verses are, uh, he's saying, I am the father of the whole universe. So you already see that on the screen. I'm the mother, I'm the maintainer, and I'm the grandfather. Then he's saying, I'm the object of knowledge, I'm the purifier, I'm the syllable Om. He's saying, I'm also the Vedas, the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Yajur Veda. I'm the goal, I'm the sustainer, I'm the master. I'm the abode, I'm the shelter, I'm the dearest friend. I'm the creation, destruction, maintenance of all. I'm the resting place, I'm the eternal seed. I give heat, I cause rain. I withhold and send forth that rain. I am the immortality, I am also the death. I am both spirit, I am the matter also, and so on. So, like you see, they understand and worship the Lord or the absolute truth as universal form. They see the Lord everywhere in everything, and that is how they worship the Lord. And that is what Lord Krishna is saying. Krishna is all pervading, ultimate shelter, cause of all causes. Now here the two examples or the couple of examples that I've chosen here is that when these people consider that I am the father of the whole universe, or the Lord is the father of the whole universe. Now the word father actually implies here shelter. So we all have our parents, we all have our mothers, fathers, and so on. And sometimes we read in our Sanskrit verses, in Sanskrit prayers, where it says Matra Devo Bhava, Pitra Devo Bhava, means the father is our God, the mother is our God. So what does that mean? Does that mean that the father that we have, or the biological father that we have, he has become a God? Or the mother that we have, she has become God? No, that doesn't mean that. What does it mean? It means that the shelter that we experience from our father and the mother, the love and the care, the emotional love and the care, or the selfless love and care that we experience through our father and our mother, actually that shelter of our parents is actually representative of the Lord. So that is how the Vishwato Mukham or the pantheists actually looks towards the understanding of the Lord or the absolute truth. So these are the people, as I've been mentioning, they are somewhere in between the two extremes. And then there are two other categories, which is Prathaktwena. Prathaktwena means the worshippers of the Devi Devatas, understanding that actually the absolute truth has now manifested in the form of Devi Devatas. And then the third category is the Ekatvena, where the understanding is that I am also spiritual and the Lord is also spiritual. So these are the three categories of people which are lying in between the two extremes of the Mudhas, which are atheists. Also, we call them as Mayavadis because they think that the Lord form is Maya. It's a product of matter, and these are the two categories on the left hand side of the extreme. And the other category is the pure devotees, which consider the Lord as the supreme, and then they take their shelter wholeheartedly. And in between we have these three categories: Prathaktwena, Ekatvena, and Vishwatomukha. So that is the sum and substance of today's class. It was a challenge for me to prepare this class in a way that I could explain this as cogently, as smoothly to you. I'm not sure how successful I am, but that is a humble attempt to explain these 10 verses from Gita's chapter number 9. So any questions, any comments devotees might have, that's the time now to discuss. So I will say Shrimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, open for discussion. Thank you very much. See complete silence. I don't know whether it was too complicated.
How do we, so let's say we are in one of these, how do we move from one to the other? I mean, you mentioned various levels of worshippers. So let's say we are in one, how do we move to the next level?
Yeah, because now you understand various categories, so you already understand the topmost category, isn't it? The topmost category, as I have explained in verse number 13 and 14, where the Lord is saying that Mahatmanas tumam partha devim prakritim ashrita. So the sambandha gyan, first of all, has to be very clear. Sambandha gyan means the relationship with the Lord. So like the Mayavadis or the atheists, they think that the atheists think that it is only for my personal benefit. The Mayavadis think that we will become God. So both these philosophies understand or ridicule the position of the Lord. However, we understand that the Lord is supreme, and we are the sevaks of the Lord. We are the servants of the Lord. Our job is mainly to serve the Lord. And how can we move from in whatever position we are? First of all, we should get our understanding very correct. Our understanding should be that we are the servants and the Lord is the master. And then we engage in the process that further intensifies this relationship. And that process is, as we have been explaining, the chanting of the holy names, the practice of reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, the holy scriptures. Then association of devotees. We associate with these Mahatmas only. We hear from them, we follow their lifestyle, we follow their uh, teachings, and so on. And then D stands for diet. So D, we eat the remnants of food that we have offered to the Supreme Lord. So that is the in nutshell the process.
How are you?
Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Prabhu.
Yeah, I mean, apart from the understanding, do we get any signs of that we are moving in the correct path? So, how do we verify that this is the progression we need to follow? Yeah, of course, the Shastras they provide this path, but how do we really take it beyond the understanding? Because understanding can take it only to a certain distance, right?
Yeah. So the self-evaluation milestones for understanding that whether we are making a progress in this path or not, there are very clear-cut descriptions that are provided, but I will restrict mainly to the explanations in the Gita. See, first of all, when we take to devotional service or when we take to Shuddha Bhakti, we feel some kind of a relief from material bombardment that we have throughout from our life. So we feel some kind of a relief. For example, uh, the bad habits that we might have developed because of our bad association in our previous lives or maybe in this life, we will start to see that those bad habits potentially have started to reduce. I'm not saying that it is going to go away too soon, because it's a gradual process. It takes time. It takes time. It comes in stages. Sometimes we fall also. We make a mistake and we go back a little bit backward also. But whatever it is, the process takes a little time. It's gradual. So the first symptom is you will start to see that your bad habits are reducing, or now you have a little better control over your bad habits. For example, one habit I would say could be that people might be waking up late in the morning, although they might be understanding that I am waking up late and I need to get rid of this bad habit of mine, but I'm not able to do it. However, when you are engaged in the process of bhakti, when you are doing these activities of chanting, reading books, associating with devotees, and doing all these activities, slowly and slowly, that kind of a small purification will start to come from within your heart. So that is one symptom. The second symptom of further progress is that now you start to feel happier. You start to feel joyous, and in between feeling joyous and improving on your bad habits, The second stage is your hankering for material things will come down. Hankering for material things means, for example, you are working in an office, and in the office there is a very competitive environment, and people are actually when you hear that your colleague got a promotion or he got a very good raise, you might feel a little saddened in your heart. You might feel a little envy in your heart. You might think, oh, that person got such a nice raise, why could I not get, I should also get it. Now when you start to practicing devotional service, those material hankerings will come down. I'm not saying it will go away completely, but that the volume of these material hankerings will come down. Now if, for example, in a particular review of your job in a particular year you could not get that raise, you will think that, okay, no problem, maybe it was Lord's plan, uh, probably that is fine. You might feel some pain, but not the same degree of pain as you would have felt once you were not engaged in these activities. Because once you engage in these activities, your focus shifts to a different way. Now you are being exposed to a knowledge which is giving you a knowledge of reality which is beyond the material reality that you see around you always. You understand that by doing your actions, by doing all these activities, you are setting yourself on a path where you are going to get much more superior, much more happiness, much more uh, satisfaction, uh, and that is where once you start to realize that taste, once you start to realize that satisfaction by doing these activities of bhakti, then your attraction towards those uh, lower attractions like having more money, having more wealth, having more prestige, having more glories, that will come down. So that is how the process works, and that is how you can evaluate yourself on the path of bhakti. Oh no, earlier I was hankering a little more when I was maybe before I came to these classes or before I started practicing these bhakti, I was hankering more. So that's how it works. I hope that tries to answer your question.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
it took me a
Prabhuji,
little
can I add a
while.
couple of things on that?
Yes, Prabhuji, please go ahead.
Nandkishore. See, so part of it is from experience and this thing, etc. One is your interest. The question is your priorities and interest change.
Correct.
Then, like Prabhuji was saying, the same incident, your priority is different. You are now not looking that I have to get this thing, do this in my work, etc. Your priority gets rounded. Second thing is, like he was saying, our own perspective on everything changes. A setback, you recover from a setback much quickly, and the setback you reconcile, there is not such a big setback. There are many things, this is one small thing, etc. And the third thing is what happens over a period of time, your tolerance and your acceptance becomes everything. Like, for example, you say, okay, this is the way it is meant to be, this is the way God wants it. Everything you look at it as a prasad. Even monetarily, sometimes, like you was talking about increment, raises, and this thing, etc. Then you look at the increment more as indifferently as an outsider. This is a prasad, somebody has got more prasad, somebody has got less prasad, like that, etc. It definitely changes all these, you will feel. And lastly, even your quality of your bhakti changes. See, when you are doing your prayer, same prayer you may be doing, but you will see more heart into it. I am experiencing it, that's why I am sharing it. So these are 3-4 things that I have personally experienced, let's say in the last 2 years. And I just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, those were very nice points,
Yeah,
Prabhuji.
thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good.
I think the same thing, that whatever happens is for the goodwill of everything. I think जो भी होता है अच्छे के लिए होता है, and I think yes, this experience is also coming to me also.
Yeah.
Very nice, Prabhuji. One question on this impersonalist. So these impersonalists are not atheist, correct? So they believe in God, they believe in the spiritual life and all these things.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
Or do they
Yeah, kindly complete your question. Okay.
Yeah. So that means do they think there is anything supreme, or they do not think there is no supreme or something like that? There is
No.
no supreme Godhead or
Yeah. So the fundamental problem in their thinking is that they think that we will become supreme one day.
okay.
Although they might be spiritualists, they might be practicing spiritual topics, they might even wear saffron, but underlying their heart, underlying their psyche, the thinking is, or the understanding is, that I will become God. That is where the fundamental problem comes. So we also discussed about impersonalists, or a little bit, maybe we call them Brahmavadis. They also think that the Lord is spiritual, but they don't think that we will become God, or I will become God one day. That they do not think, and that is why that the Lord doesn't ridicule or so. He puts them into a category which is in between these two ends, and that is why they are called Ekatvena. They still think that we are spiritual, Lord is also spiritual. That is where they are. But the impersonalists go a little bit further, or maybe they go in a different or a wrong direction, where they start to think that I am also spiritual, Lord is also spiritual, so I am God. They extrapolate that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So you see all these babas and sadhus making all this kind of you see a lot of followers nowadays, correct? Of all these people. So these are all to be categorized under impersonalist or something, or
No,
that is still they are
you
more.
have to check from them. You have to, maybe the fundamental question that you have asked is, how do you define absolute truth? How do you define Param
Correct.
Satya? आप उसकी व्याख्या कैसे करते हैं? From that you can get an idea what they are thinking about it, and what category they are. Yeah.
Okay.
But Prabhuji, can I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
ask from Shobha?
Yes, Mataji. Yes, please.
Yeah, but doesn't in the beginning of the class when we started, doesn't God say that He is part of all of us and we are all part of Him? So not that I want to become God or something. Isn't me also a part of God? So what is wrong if I'm thinking of another God as and I pray to Him, because we are all part of God Himself.
Yeah,
So this
we are part only.
impersonalist and personalist.
Yeah. So when we say we are part, so the part is part. It doesn't become a whole. The
Yeah,
part
true.
should remain. The part should understand its position as a part. It should not claim
Correct.
that he has become the whole, isn't it? So we
Yes.
say that we are Brahman,
Yeah.
we are spirit, but the Lord
Yeah.
is Para Brahman. The Lord is supreme spirit.
True.
So we are,
Yeah.
for example, there is a fire, a big fire, and there is a small spark in the fire. So our position is,
Yeah.
the spark and the fire both are hot. Both are having the same quality of which the fire has. But the spark of
True.
fire cannot burn something. But a big fire can actually burn some house or burn some property. So although quality wise we are same as the Lord, we are also Satchidanand. The Lord is also Satchidanand, but we are tiny. He is magnificent. So like we have ocean and the drop in an ocean. If you analyze the content of the drop of an ocean and in the ocean water, the chemical analysis will say both are same. Maybe there is so much percentage of salt, though so much percentage of water in both. However, the ocean can float a ship. A ship can float in the ocean, but in a drop, nothing can happen, isn't it? So that fundamental understanding, if we have, that is what we call in terms of Shastra, that fundamental understanding we call as Sambandh Gyan, the knowledge of relationship between the Lord and the living entity. What these Mayavadis or the impersonalists or these people do is, they understand that we are qualitatively same, and since we are qualitatively same, I am also God.
Okay.
Or I will become God.
I got that. But doesn't God, aren't we all doing only what God wants us to do? Only what He wills we are doing, right? No, we are all doing what God wants us to do. Krishna or the spirit
that is,
or whatever.
yeah. So that is the, Okay, please complete your question. Yeah.
Yeah, because we are only doing what he wills us to do. Nothing that we are doing out of his will. We are doing it only what he wills us to do. So probably like he willed us to think like this and some to think like that.
No, no,
Is
no.
it because
Yeah. So that is where,
because the Vaishnava way of seeing things is because of ISKCON. In the sense, Krishna is the greatest, blah blah, whatever.
Mhm,
So like I'm not saying they are wrong or these are wrong, but
mhm.
it is Krishna himself who made us believe like this or think like this or do like this.
No.
So I think it's not fair.
Yeah.
It's
So there
not
is a,
fair to say that.
yeah. So if Krishna would want to think the way Krishna wants, then there cannot be duality. There cannot be a
Right.
relationship. There cannot be a relationship. In a relationship, you are Shobha and I am Keshav Gopal,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Shobha,
Correct.
in
Yeah.
this relationship, Shobha has a free will to interact with Keshav Gopal, and Keshav Gopal also has a free will to interact with Shobha, isn't it? So
Correct.
similarly,
Correct.
the Lord is a person and we are also independent individual personalities. We all have our free wills. The Lord has its own free will. We also have our own free will.
Yeah.
We also have
Yeah.
our independence. Lord also have its independence. Like what you say, we understood that example in 9.6, where the Lord is giving an example that I am the sky and the wind is blowing
Correct.
everywhere in the sky, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
does it mean that the
Yeah.
wind is blowing everywhere in the sky but does not go beyond the sky? What does it mean is
Yes.
that the living entity who is compared to a wind here is that the living entity has some independence. Living entity
Correct. So
has some
we are a
independence,
little.
but it cannot go beyond the rules and regulations I have set. It cannot go beyond that.
Okay.
So in its own independence, it can do whatever it likes. So tomorrow, if somebody wants to say that no, we don't believe what you just explained in the class, so the person is independent to leave the class. I cannot force or the Krishna is or ISKCON or Krishna or Vaishnavas or whatever you can call from wherever this understanding is coming. We are not forcing. We are not forcing anything. And even if you look at Bhagavad Gita, after Krishna spoke the whole Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, what he says to Arjuna is, now I have explained you what I thought was best in your interest. Now deliberate upon it and do what you like. So the Lord doesn't interfere with the independence of the living entity. And that is where the relationship of love can come. When I personally choose out of my own independent accord that I will love Krishna, then Krishna will take interest in me. Or that is actually the meaning of love. I cannot force love on somebody. Krishna doesn't force love on the living entities that you have to love me. No, that it doesn't do.
Okay. But if I'm saying I'm loving Shiva, for example, or Durga for some time, it does not mean Krishna will not love me, right?
No, not at all like that.
I'm independent.
What we are trying to explain in these classes is, so demigod worship that we have been mentioning is that certainly is demigods are very, very respectable figures. These are the personalities which have been appointed by Supreme Lord to perform various activities in the universe. So certainly, if you can think that Supreme Lord who will choose various personalities, how exalted those personalities would be. If Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi chooses you to do some activity, certainly there must be some speciality within you. That is why he has chosen you, isn't it? So similarly, these are very, very exalted personalities, and these are all very respectable to us, to the Vaishnavas. But we cannot equate their position to the Supreme Lord, isn't it? So that is what Lord is trying to explain in these Gita verses. His position, and the position of the other living entities, exalted living entities like Brahma, where in the 8th chapter we have studied that A Brahma Bhuvana Loka, where Lord is trying to say that even in the abode of Brahma there is death and life. Punaravartino Arjuna. There is a birth and death, and then that's how he he tries to explain the position of the demigods also, where he says that I only give the result actually. Yeah.
So
Okay.
you say Brahma and Shiva are demigods. Are
Yes,
you
Brahma.
saying them?
So
them demigods?
Brahma certainly is in the category of a demigod, which means he's a devata who creates the universes. So the Lord has
So
appointed
this whole
him.
concept of Tridev, no, the
Sorry?
whole concept of Tridev is not there. The
No, the
whole concept
concept
of
of
Tridev
Tridev
is
is
not
there.
there.
Concept of Tridev is there.
Huh.
So that you will understand when you understand the process of creation in a little detail. So what happens is
Okay.
that there is Lord Krishna in his supreme abode, which is spiritual Golok Vrindavan. From there are multiple expansions of Krishna that happen, and from one of those
Okay.
expansions comes Mahavishnu. So this Mahavishnu,
Oh, okay, got that.
from Mahavishnu,
Got that.
from the pores of Mahavishnu, comes out innumerable universes. When the Lord decides to create, that's how the process of creation works. Now, from these pores of Mahavishnu, when their multiple universes are coming, then the same Mahavishnu expands as Garbhodakshai Vishnu. So the Garbhodakshai Vishnu enters into these universes and makes these universes alive. From this Garbhodakshai
Okay.
Vishnu comes Brahma. From his navel comes a lotus,
Okay.
and then comes Brahma. And from the forehead of Brahma comes Rudra, comes Shiva.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay, got that.
and from this Brahma also comes Shirodakshai Vishnu. Shirodakshai Vishnu. So,
Okay.
like I have been mentioning about, there's a Paramatma situated in our heart. So, who is that Paramatma?
Yeah.
Who is that form? That is Shirodakshai Vishnu. So, you can see the Vishnus also are all
Okay.
three: Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and Shirodakshai Vishnu. So, when we talk about this
Okay.
Trinity, we talk about Shirodakshai Vishnu, we talk about this Shiva, and we talk about this Brahma. So, every universe
Okay.
has its own
Got that.
Vishnu, has its own Shiva, and has its own Brahma. But
Okay.
there is
Okay,
only
got
one
that.
Krishna
Yeah.
who's situated in Golok Vrindavan.
Oh,
There is only
okay.
one Krishna.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Yeah. Thank you. So good
You
question
really have
answers.
patience.
No worries.
You really,
This is the objective of the classes, to educate and disseminate this Vedic knowledge, which for whatever reasons we are bereft of, and ultimately this knowledge of very good value, a lot of good benefit we can derive upon. And when we hear these kind of words, we are clear what our shastras are saying, and we are convinced whatever process we are taking up not whimsically. We are taking up after due diligence, after due consideration, after due understanding of various things. And that's the reason we are taking so much effort and pain to come to people and educate them about Gita, Srimad Bhagavat, and so on. Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you.
So we are, I think there has been a lot of discussion, and I've forgot the track of time. What's the time now?
7:10.
Oh yeah,
7:10.
7:10. Okay. So maybe if there is any other last question, maybe we can take that, or otherwise I will like to thank everyone for joining us. Any other point, any other comment, thought?
Are there any instances in the Puranas or any of the scriptures which gives this relationship between the Supreme Krishna and the demigods?
Yeah, you can, if you want to read that, you can read Chaitanya Charitamrit, where it says, Ekale Ishvara Krishna Arsa Bhritya. Arsa Bhritya. Bhritya means servants, or maybe the sevaks.
Thank you, sir.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Hare Krishna Mataji. So otherwise, if you read Srimad Bhagavatam, there will not be absolutely any doubt if you read Srimad Bhagavatam about this particular thing. Where simply if you read the process of creation, where Brahmaji creates a lot of Devi Devatas, and even Lord Shiva is created by Lord Brahma. Like that, if you read those passages, if you read the prayers of many of these demigods, if you read the prayers of Lord Shiva in Srimad Bhagavatam, if you read prayers of Lord Brahma in Srimad Bhagavatam, there will not be absolutely any doubt. If you read Bhagavad Gita, maybe there is some scope for some discussion here and there. Even that is not there ultimately. But if you read Srimad Bhagavatam, there won't be iota of any doubt if you read these prayers, where even Lord Shiva has been mentioned praying to Lord Krishna that actually you are the Mukti Pradata, you are the Mukti Pradata, and so on and so forth. So more to come. Kindly continue to join and participate in the classes. We can discuss more about these topics in the future classes.
Will you start a Bhagavatam class? Will you start a
Mataji,
Bhagavatam class?
first of all, we have to finish the Bhagavad Gita class. I have already started a Bhagavad Gita class in Hindi on Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. And so that
Okay.
means that is taking quite some effort on my behalf. 2 classes in a week. Certainly, we will try to do something about Bhagavatam class after we finish our Bhagavad Gita classes, and that's how we will do. Yeah, but nobody is stopping you. You can make use of YouTube, your own endeavors to try to start developing some understanding of Srimad Bhagavatam. And so parallelly, if you do that, that is actually going to help you in Bhagavad Gita only. Yeah, in these classes.
Okay.
Okay, so with
Thank
that, I think we are over. We have reached 7:15, which is already our stipulated time. And I would really like to thank all the devotees who have joined me in this class, given their precious 1.5 hours. I really thank from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare
Srila
Krishna.
Bhagavad Gita ki
Hare
jai.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.